It can be annoying and challenging to make your blog's URLs pretty much concise. In fact, your friends can think you are actually trying to hack them. Today, I bring to you Shrivel, an app that you can customize your URLs and shorten them to your preference. We have a pretty much short and concise URL that is custom made to your domain name. Now, when you copy this URL and share it with your friends, now you have a shorter URL that is way much concise and will redirect your users to your targeted blog page. Let's get into the video and build this app. The first thing we're going to do is to pretty much create a folder and call it Shrivel. Now go ahead and open this in your favorite IDE. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. And now we have pretty much nothing. All we're going to do is use Next.js to build this application. Now, Next.js has been one of the best platforms or frameworks to build full stack applications. In fact, the React.js platform suggests to use Next.js to build these applications. And all we're going to do is to write npx create next app at latest, which is going to be Next.js 15, and then we're going to use this directory. We'll give it some time to build. We're going to say yes. We use Next.js 15. We're not going to use TypeScript. We're going to use ESLint. Yes to that. Yes to Tailwind. No to the source directory. Yes to app router. Yes to TurboPark. And no to the alias. And that will bootstrap our application. Now that our application is up, the first thing we're going to do is to test it on whether it's running. And voila. Now that our application is up and running, we can go ahead to the next steps and start configuring our application. I'll put this on the side and push that on the side. First thing it's going to do is to configure our application and move a few things around. Now, we're going to use route groups to group whatever we need in our application. And the first thing we will do is to create a route. And in this route is where we're going to have our main page. All right, this main page, which would be the index, and then the rest is going to pretty much stay as is. Now, the next thing we're going to do is to add another folder here called components. And then in components, we'll have a hero, and we will have a footer, and we will have the menu at the moment. Now I'll go ahead in here in our route, since it's over here, and delete everything. So I will minimize this and that and pretty much delete all this. All right. I'll go ahead and delete all these as well. And pretty much close the class. So now when we come over here, we have home. We just need to test that everything is running. And then come over here in our hero, in our menu, and create .js. And then in here, we're going to create another function. React function. And all we're going to do is this is the menu, and we'll just write menu. if you are used to arrow functions, all you're gonna do is to come over here and then name it const, and then that would be page, and then we won't need props, and we're gonna name this menu, sorry, and then pretty much do that and make sure we export this page, this component, and then don't forget to close this because it can become a mess if you don't. Then the other thing is that we're gonna add this in a React fragment, and then get this menu and write it over here. So there we go. So now I'll do the same thing. In fact, I'll just copy all this and then come to the footer, pretty much create a page.js, and then paste the same thing, but this time around I'll add footer. Now the next thing I'm gonna do is to leave that as this, much as it's not gonna need it, but yeah, there we go. So now this is the footer. So now we're gonna come to the layout, our layout over here, and pretty much what we're gonna do is to delete all these fonts, and also come over here to the class name and delete that too. I'll show you how you can update that now. To make sure this is pretty much clear to you, I'll go ahead and put that on the same line, and the children is going to be the content of each page. Now this time around we only have the home page, so whatever is in the home page, for example, if you had an about page, this the contents over here would change. However, at the top, if we have the menu and close it off, so this is the menu we just created. You notice that it's being imported from components menu page. And down here, if we add that footer, so we would be in business. So now if I come over here, you notice that we have the menu and the footer. Okay, so now what we can do, if you want to see the differences, so now we're on home. All right, so if we come to home and change this, so now we have home page. All right, so now for example, if we over here in our root, if we had an about page, okay, remember the folders are going to be the routes. All right, so in the about page, come over here and say page.js, and then come to the home page. I'll minimize that, come to the home page. So I'll take this away because we pretty much do not need it. Copy this and go to our about page, and then add about. Again, you can use the same approach whereby you export everything right away as soon as you implement the page, or use an arrow function, all right, or anonymous function, whatever you call it. So now this is page. Okay, I mean, this is the about page. Now if I get over here, this is pretty much giving you a little bit of behind scenes. I pretty much explained everything in our previous video when we were building our task management system. So if you want some clearance on routing in Next.js, just go ahead and watch that video. It has pretty much everything laid out. But to give you a little bit of what's going on is that if you come to the menu over here and then do something like link times, let's say 3. Sorry, this is link. All right. And then this is going to be imported. Import link from next link. All right. So you do this. This is import. So you do this and now link is good. So if you have home and over here you have about, now you pretty much just need to come over here and just add the about and do the same thing to home. There we go. So now if we go back to our page, look, we have I'll give this some right class name. We have flex row, all right, and then maybe a gap of about 3. Okay, and then save this. All right, so now we have these 2 links. So if we click on home, you're gonna stay on home. If you click on about, you're gonna come to about. So awesome. Our routes are pretty much working out well. But in this application, I'm not pretty much gonna build the about page. I wanted to show you an example of what happens behind scenes. So now what we're gonna do is you can go ahead and build the about on your own, but what we are gonna do is to make some house cleaning, get to global over here, and what I'm gonna do is to eliminate the dark mode. I'm not gonna need it, but you can go ahead and change this to your preference. So now if you do that, now we have an about you know, we have the white background, the regular the normal background. The next thing I will do is to now stage. All right, so now the next thing I'm gonna do is to pretty much build out our our menu. So the next thing I'm gonna do is to pretty much build out our menu. So the first thing I'll do is to give it a width of full, flex row, and items center, and pretty much give it a justify center, and I'll go ahead and convert this into navs, and obviously a background of white. If you want to change that, I mean, we already have a white, and a flex of wrap, and a padding of 6, both vertically and horizontally. Now the other thing I'll do is to, within this nav, I'm gonna create another div, and within this div is where I'm gonna do some magic. So I will have a width of 80%, and I'll have a flex, and then flex items item center, and then flex shrink 0, and then text white, and a margin of 6, margin right of 6. Okay, and then within here, honestly, all I'm gonna do, I'll save you from that. I'll make sure, let me turn on this. Okay, and I think tab 9. All right, so all I'm gonna do here is, we already have our link, so I'll add that, and then I'll give an href, because now we're trying to build out our home page. Okay, so now either way that works, and I'll have a class name. Okay, I'll have a class name of flex and flex row. Now within here I'll need an image. All right, and within this image we need a couple of things. We need a source. All right, and in our source I'll add these assets in the description below or in the repository. Just go ahead and download the repository and work with it. So I'll have a logo, which is shrivel logo.svg. All right. Okay. And then within in here, okay, okay, it's because of the image. So what I'll do is to import image from say next image, right? So in here I'm gonna need a class name, all right, of where the height is 8 and margin of 2, right? And then I'll have a width of 54 and a height of 54, and then obviously I'll need an alt of shrivel logo. So now with these you can always just add that or desire not to add it at all. All right, I'm trying to see what we are messing up here because that's an equals, and now we are good to go. Now, you may notice that we are missing the logo. All right, so what we're gonna do is to come over here in public. Now, if you go ahead and create a folder here called assets, just make sure you add assets over here. So now what I will do is to come into our assets and then pretty much add that logo. So yeah, so now if we minimize this, okay, we have our logo right there. Okay, so now the other thing we're gonna do is to add a word right next to the image. So I'll get a span, and then this span will be the actual name of the application. So now this span has a class name of font. We have font. So now we have a font of extra bold, right? And then we have a text of 3 times extra large. Okay, and we will have the color, which is text teal 500 and a tracking of tight, right? So let's go ahead and see our application updates, and voila. So we do not have it as bold and looks good to me. The next thing we're gonna do is to try to get rid of these fonts because at the moment we're not using them. So let's use a font that I like most, which is called Montserrat. And this is coming from next/font/Google. Now, the next thing we're going to do is to now instantiate that font, or create some sort of variable that is going to hold that font. So Montserrat is equal to Montserrat, the class that you just imported, and then this has a couple of things that it takes in, a couple of arguments. So now what we're going to do is to use the subset, and within the subset we have the Latin. Now that's it. So this is Montserrat, and then in order for these fonts to be active, all we need to do is to come over here in the body and say Montserrat dot class name. All right, and just like that. All right, so we save this, reload that, and since these are variables, JS variables, we need to make sure that we, in order to access this, we need to make sure that we get rid of the quotes and instead use brackets. So there we go. So now you see the fonts have now changed. All right. Yeah. So the next thing we're going to do is to go to the footer. The footer needs some work, and pretty much all we're going to do is come over here in the footer and within this we're going to name this footer and then a class name with padding top of 10 and a background of blue 500 950, and that's it. Then we're going to get into inside this and then create a div, and this div is going to be holding a bunch of things. So we have a class name, all right, and that class has a max width of the screen, and then we have margin, horizontal margin X or horizontal margin, which is going to be auto, and then we have a padding X of 4 and a text of gray 600, and then on medium screens we'll have padding X 8. All right, cool. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to implement another div in here, which is gonna hold so the first one was a wrapper, so we have another div in here, and all we have is a class name, and then within here we have a justify of content between, and then on small screens we're gonna do a flex. All right, within here again, bear with me, we'll have another div that pretty much has a class name, all right, of spacing space y instead, which is gonna be 6. Okay, and then we'll have bear with me, this is the last one, so div of a class name, and then this is gonna hold the logo. All right, so we have a flex row, and then justify center, and then items center. All right, then within here is where we're gonna have our image. Okay, so this is capital I. Make sure you import this. So this will come from next/image. Right, now this image has a couple of things. It has a source, and it has a width, and it has a height, and lastly it has an alt. All right, so within here we're just gonna name it the shrivel logo, and then the height will pretty much be 20, and then width of 20. And then in here, to access the image, all we're gonna do is shrivel and then logo and SVG. All right. So now the next thing we're gonna do is to supplement a word, which is gonna be shrivel. All right, and then this is gonna have a class name, and the classes that we're gonna have, we have font bold and text 3 times XL and tracking of tight and a text of teal that is 400. Sounds good. Okay, font of, this is the weight of the text. All right. So now that we have those sorted out, the next thing we're gonna do is to pretty much try to add a margin over here. We can add a class, and then all we're gonna do is a margin on the right that is gonna be 2, and then the rest are just placeholders. Perfect. So now that we've implemented all this, the next thing we can do, honestly, is to implement a list of terms and conditions. Because if we try to go back on this app, we have a couple of things going on over here. So now you can add terms and conditions, you can add, ask people to go to your app, anything that you prefer. So now all we're gonna do is to come over here outside this wrapper of the logo, all right? And then pretty much just come over here and then add, yeah, we're gonna come right outside over here and then add a new div. And then this div has pretty much simple things such as a margin of top that is pretty much 6. And then within here, because we are creating a wrapper, all we need right now is a simple span. All right, and that span will say get the app or download app. All right, so in here, we can just say it has a class name that is text of gray 700 and font of semi bold and a text of neutral about 300. That's it. Oh, I will go with, I think, 300. All right, let's see how that looks. Perfect. That looks good. Now, in here, the next thing is that we are gonna need another wrapper. So we need a div. So we need a div that has a class name whereby we have items center and a gap of 3 and a margin top of 3, and on small screens we want a display of block. In here we'll need one more thing, which is going to be a link. All right, and that link will link to any URL for your application on Apple Store or Google Play Store. Now the only thing I'm going to do in here is to pretty much add an image. I'll first import, sure I have this, and make sure that I have link imported. And within here, I'll just say image, right? So this image is self-closing, and the image has a source that I'll include shortly. Or what we can do is to go on SVG repo. There are a bunch of platforms out there. So what you can do is to come to SVG repo and then search for Google Play. So now there will be a bunch of icons over here, but the one we're interested in is this one. Now I'll download the SVG because those are really flexible, and I'll call it Google Play. And then the other thing, I'll download App Store. App Store. And then I'll scroll all the way down and find the one we are looking for. Hopefully we find it. Okay. So let's add on download App Store. Okay, we do not have that, so it should be somewhere online, but I'll add the link to it in the description below. So all you're gonna do So what I've pretty much done is to include the SVGs directly to save time. But you can go ahead and look for those SVGs online and pretty much download them. All right, so now the next thing we're going to do is to add a copyright. Okay, I'll minimize this. These are actually SVGs. It's not the best way to do it, but I went ahead and did it to save time, right? But within here, they're pretty much links containing SVGs. All right. In other words, you would just, if you have the actual images, like we downloaded the Google Play Store, just go ahead and use an image to access it. Shouldn't be a big deal. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is to get out right over here, because this is a wrapper for mobile downloads. So get out of here and then create another wrapper, which is going to be our last wrapper. And that wrapper is pretty much going to be a div. And that div has a bunch of class attributes. So within here, we have margin of top, and we have padding Y that is 10, and a border at the top. And on medium screens to large, we have a text of center, and on small, the color should be text neutral, that is 300. And then what's our text? The text is pretty much gonna be a span or a paragraph, a p tag, that is gonna be copyright, and then shrivel, then all rights reserved. Okay, so now the next thing we're gonna do is to, so take a look at that. So now these are not aligned the way we want. So what we're gonna do, we are going to do some reformatting over here. All right, so we have that. All we're gonna do is to move it a little bit down, and voila, problem solved. Okay, so Why? Because we were, if I try to minimize, this is the wrapper for mobile downloads, and this is the wrapper for the logo, the footer logo. So this wrapper and this wrapper are supposed to be in a display flex column. All right. So over here by default, it's going to be display flex. If I try to do it, flex column. All right. So it's pretty much the same thing. All right. So what we are missing now to try to mimic exactly what we have is to come in here and give it a padding, because that was the only issue, padding of 10. All right, so now over here, what we are actually missing is that we need the date, all right, to be auto-populated whenever every calendar year updates. Now to do this is pretty much simple. All you need to do is to take advantage of the date class in JavaScript, which is going to be equal to new date. All right. Now within here, the date function has the date. Now that we've created a date constructor or a date object, now that we have a date object, all we need to do is to create a JavaScript to create brackets in order to access this data. So date to dot get full year is the function that we can use to access the current year. And now if you come over here, it will be 2024. You do not need to come into your application all the time to update the year manually. So now that we are done with the footer, done with the menu, we are good to go to the hero section. And now, of course, one thing I forgot to let you know is that you can update the title of your application and the description. This would be very helpful when it comes to SEO in your application and rankings on Google. All you need to do is to come over here in your layout and change this to shrivel, and then a pipe, and then something that talks about your app. Shorten any URL. And then in the description, all you need to do is to rewrite shorten any URL with a custom name. Now this is what makes this application stand out from all other URL shorteners. Now moving forward, all we can do is to view our current updates. And just like that, we have our title. Now again, we need to sort of add some class, which is going to be a flex, and flex of column, because we want everything in here to be aligned vertically. And then justify content center, and then align items center, and then lastly. Now comes to the step where we need to develop our hero, and all we need to do is just to go to the hero and then add a page.js. Now within here, I told you I prefer more using arrow functions, and all I'm gonna do is write hero and then instantiate whatever it needs to be returned. So return. And then in here, never forget the React fragments. And then within here is where we can write our main or div. And then this is hero. So now lastly, you don't need to forget to export default and then hero. Now when you come to our main page, which should be this one, in here, get rid of this, and then pretty much just instantiate just call our hero. Don't forget to close it. Now again, we need to sort of add some class, which is going to be a flex, and flex of column because we want everything in here to be aligned vertically, and then justify content center, and then align items center, and then lastly then the next thing you're going to do is to add a main in here, because when bots are searching your website, they are mainly looking for the main page. Now in here, you can add a class name, and then the class would be width full, and then flex, and then flex column, and then justify items center, and then items center, align items center. Our aim here is to build a hero section that looks beautiful just like this, and we're going to be able to do it. The first thing we're going to need to do is to now get in here, because this is pretty much our div wrapper, and pretty much give it a full width and a minimum height of about 90 dvh. Okay, we're missing something. This is class name. Right, and we will need a flex and display flex of column, and pretty much justify item center and items align items center. Okay, so now that we have that, just want to make sure everything is aligned well. So now that we have that, in here we're gonna need a section, all right, that is gonna hold everything, and that section will have a class name of pretty much width full. Okay, and then within this section we're gonna have a div. Okay, and this is also gonna be a wrapper, so wrapper, and it's gonna be on full width and justify content center and items center. All right, because we are trying to get things that are gonna hold the image and our hero text. Okay, so now we will need, now this is gonna be the wrapper that holds the hero text. Okay, and we will have another wrapper that holds the image. All right, how about we start with the image? All right, so in here all we're gonna do is say class name, and that is gonna be on medium screens, it's gonna be a half of the screen of the whole width, and then on small screens it will be, so all you can do honestly over here, you can just say on small screens it's gonna be a width of full, and then it will be hidden, or you can just say it will be hidden on small screens, and on medium screens it will be flex. So pretty much same thing as not giving that anything at all, and then get over here and then give it flex, because it's the same thing. You just be rewriting the same thing. So and then give it that. All right, and then in here all we need to do is to give it an image. Okay, and I'll just complete this and try to save time, and then make sure that I import, all right, image from next image. All right, So make sure this is one word. Okay, so however, in here, the image that we are importing, I'll add these images. Image we are importing, make sure you have the files that I added in the description below, because that's gonna make things easy for you. So we have the image of illustration hyphen working, okay? And then the size of what we actually need is 600 by 600. Okay, so now this image also has a class name, and that class name is, we're gonna go ahead and emphasize it being hidden on smaller screens and display flex on medium and larger screens. All right, so now if we try to view, we have that image right there. Okay, so now that we have the image, now it's going to be easy for us to come back over here and populate our hero text. Honestly, all we need to do that is to give this a class name. Hit it when it moves, so give it a class name. All right, and in this class name, all we shall need is to get a flex, display flex, and then flex of row, and then width of 80% and a height of 60 dvh, and then justify content between, and then items center, and then content between, and then give it a space of y5, and then on media screens the space will be horizontal, which is x5, and then max margin x of auto, and then text should be center. So now, since we have this, now we need to get our image wrapper, all right, and then move it in here, which is going to be the hero text, and then another div that is the image. So if we go back to our hero section, there we are. All right, so now we can go ahead and minimize this, and then now start populating content in here. So now this is also gonna be a class name of width that is a half. All right, but remember that's on medium to larger screens. Okay, so now the rest is pretty much gonna be the same. All we need to do is to give it a width of full on smaller screens, and then display flex, and then flex column, and then justify content center, items center, and then a padding of y that is 12, and a space of y that is 4. All right, the first thing we're gonna do in here is to now add a header. Okay, so that header can be something like shorten and customize your URL with Shrivel. So in here we will need a class name, and we'll give it a text size of 4x extra large, and then a text of blue, which is the color. I will use 950, and font extra bold, MX auto, and on media screens, medium to large screens, we have a text of 5XL. Okay, Now let's go ahead and view what we have. Looks good to me. Okay, so the next thing is that we need some p tag, and the p tag is, I'll copy this and paste it, the content we want our user to read, and I'll go ahead and update the class. So in here we have a max width of 2xl and margin x that is auto, and text of gray that is 900. There we go. Now we're gonna need some background effects. I won't waste so much time on these, but I will copy this source code because pretty much most of them are SVGs. Now to add some background effect on this hero section, all we're gonna do is to create a new div, and we'll give it a class name, and we'll need to position it absolute, and then inset of 0 and margin of auto with a max width of extra small, height, custom height of 357 pixels, a blur with a custom blur of 118 pixels, and on small screens maximum width that is large. All right, now we can go ahead and supplement a custom style. I will tab this down below, and then in here we can add a background which is linear gradient, and in here all you need to do is to add 106.89 degrees, and then the RGB A, which is 192, 132, 252, and the opacity of 0.11. All right, this may not show on screen, but I promise you it's there. And then I'll add the next color, the central color, which is gonna be 15.73%. That is the rotation, and then an RGBA of 14, 165, 233, and the opacity of 141. And then lastly, we have 15.74, which is the rotation, and then RGBA of 232, 131, 249, and lastly the opacity of 0.26. And lastly, we're gonna have the last color, which is 56.5949%, which is the rotation, comma RGBA of 79, 70, and 229 with the opacity of 0.5. 1.5.4. Then the last one is 115.95%. Now with this is going to be self-closing, and it is pretty much a design in the background. So I missed a D here, that's why we're not seeing any effects, and that's what we have. So we may have an error somewhere, and we need to fix that. The error is right here. This is blur. And there we go. So the color is in here, but subtle. All right. Now that we've fixed it, we are good to go. The next thing we're gonna do is to pretty much add a form, something like this, where the user will enter their custom name, the URL they need to shorten, and then sort of shorten it, right? Okay, so let's develop that real quick. All right, so what we're gonna do real quick, just after the wrapper for the image and the hero text, all right, just immediately after, so over here, immediately after this wrapper that we developed, like this whole section over here, now down below is where we're gonna add, if you need to test, down below is where we're gonna add the div, the form, all right? So if we need to test, all we can do is write form, all right? So it should appear exactly right below this, all right? So real quick, what we're gonna do is to come over here in our files and get all the way to the components over here, and then just add a folder that is gonna be the we can call it redirect form, all right? Redirect form, okay? And then within here, we will add a page.js, okay? So again, we'll do a redirect form, okay? So you can use shortcuts as well to do this, but I want to bring you all the way from scratch and show you what actually happens. All right, so then in here, so it's pretty much easy. Yes, there are URLs, but it's a good idea to practice and write it without any assistance. So yeah, so here we are gonna write our main form, okay? Then come over here. Remember, we need to export it. It's always a default, and then the name of the form. So we'll come over here, in here, and then all we can do is import it. It's called the redirect form, and then voila. So now if we try to see, we still see the same content. So if I change this and I save that, so we are good to go. All right, so now that we have that information, all we're gonna do is to get in here in our component. We're gonna create a div that is gonna hold everything all together, and within this div we'll have a class that will have a couple of things. So we're gonna have a padding y that is of 12, and then flex, display flex, and then display flex direction column, and justify content obviously center, align items, center, and width of full. All right, now within here, the main wrapper, we're gonna have another div, and this div will have a class that has a position relative and a background of neutral about 100, and then a display of flex and flex direction column, and justify content center and content center, align items center, and the full width, and then the height should be pretty much auto or full. Okay, so in here is where we're gonna have our form. All right, and this form has a couple of things. So it's gonna have the actual method that is gonna be handling all the information that the user has input into our fields, and it will have a class as well. So the class here is going to be a width of about 80%, and then a position of absolute, and then it's going to be top 0, and display flex and flex column, and padding of about 14, and background of blue, okay, about 950, and then rounded of large, and on smaller screens it's gonna be display flex row and justify content center. Okay, lastly we'll have align items center. Then, since we need to pay attention to the smaller screens, we'll have a space of about 2 vertically on from smaller, 4 from medium to larger screens, and then a space of Y2 on smaller screens, and on larger screens specifically, it's gonna be a space of 0. Now in here we have some progress now, that in here we're gonna have a div or a wrapper, okay, that is gonna be handling the input. So we have an input, okay, which is self-closing, and this div will have a type of text. It will have a value, some value, okay, we'll put in, we'll add it later on, and then an onChange method. I'm gonna add this immediately after adding the instantiating all other details, but for now let's first skip the onChange and add a placeholder that will have something like enter your custom name, okay, and we will go ahead and copy this. One thing we're missing is the class, so we will have a width of full, and then a padding x of 3, padding y of about 2.5, and then a background of white, and then on focus it should have a background that is pretty much neutral and about 100, and then the duration when you're trying to hover is going to be about 150. Then we have an outline none, and rounded of large, and then a shadow and then on smaller screens maximum width should be small, and On smaller screens again, we will have a width of auto. All right, we are in a good position so far. What we're gonna do is to copy this and paste it all the way here. All right, and pretty much do the same thing, but this time around change this to URL. And then lastly, we are gonna have a button. So in here we will have a div, and then within here we will have a button, and that button will have a submit type. Okay, don't forget to add the quotes, and we'll have some name, something like shorten URL. All right, so quick thing that we can do is to add a class. Something like a class name, and then this class name, because we're going to add an icon within the button and the text. So we're going to add an icon over here. So we want everything to display flex, and then items center and justify items center and gap x of about 2, and the padding should be about 2.5, and padding x of about 4, and width of full. However, the text should be super small, and the text should be white, and we should have a font semi-bold. Then we can also add like a background of teal, which is 600, and a duration of about 150, and rounded large, and on small screens margin top should be 0, and width should be auto. Now I'm gonna quickly copy the SVG, the arrow, and place it over here. So if we save this, let's go ahead and see how we're looking like. So this is how we are at the moment. So we'll definitely need to update this. So now I'm gonna paste this SVG over here. All right, and to get this SVG, honestly, all you need to do is to come over here on SVG repo, and then you can look for arrow, something like that, and then pick out something that you are of interest, and then you can come to edit, and then edit the colors that you want, then just copy it and paste it in your HTML, or just download the SVG and use the image class in your application to pretty much image class from Next.js to pretty much import that image. Now we're gonna need to do some house cleaning over here. So I believe, so if we come over here, all right, so all we need to do is display flex, item center, justify item center, pad gap x, this should be y, so that's much better. And yeah, so now we need to fix so this is a wrapper for the input field, that's a wrapper for that. So now we need to come over here in the form and make sure that on large screens we have a display. Okay, so here we are, row, justify item center, item center, so content center. All right, looks good. Do not be alarmed by these not being in the straight line, because I promise they are. It's just that at the point I'm squeezing the page to that point where it does not make sense. But if you come over here and try to inspect the page, get to iPad, see that they're in a straight line, get to desktop, straight line, get to that, everything checks out. So let the other issue not distract you. So okay, so now we are gonna go to grabbing the data that the user is inputting. Okay, and what we're gonna do simply is to add an on form, a form here that of on submit. Okay, and on submit, what should the form do? So we're gonna do something like handle, handle user input, something like that, and then we'll come over here and then simply implement a function that simply does that. So you can use several ways, but I'll still use our functions. All right, and then in here, let's pretty much prevent something like default. All right, for starters, and then that's an event. In other words, you could just do event and then over here write event. Okay, and then you can do console.log something like form submitted. Cool. So a quick walkthrough on what is actually going on. There are different options on grabbing data, okay, from the user. Okay, and okay. Yeah, we're going to change this to a client component. And how we do that is to simply, because still either way, we're going to, because these are events and we're trying to manipulate data from the user. That's why we convert this by default. These components are server components. But anyway, yeah, so this is actually what's going to be happening. A user will over here, a user will submit the form using this button. Now, some people add a method on click here, but if you do that, then you do not need to use on submit. I really like using on submit because it has more features that you can work with. For example, rather than use, if you still want, okay, this is use. If you still want to use this as a server component, okay, all you need to do is use form data and then grab data from the user. Okay. Yeah, so over here, so now take a look what's happening here. So on change here, we're going to do that. Okay, we're going to do that. So now if the user, for example, let's go to responsive and then go to console. So if the user comes over here, I mean, we don't have values yet, but if the user comes over here and clicks on this button, we have that activated. It's going to be fired up, and now we know for sure that our form can actually grab data from the user. So now let's try to grab the data. And how to do that is pretty much we're going to come over here and we will need some sort of user state. Okay, so what we need is we need something. I'm going to maximize this to avoid any distractions. So you're going to need a state for the custom name, and then a function that resets or updates the custom name. Set custom name. Okay, and this initially is nothing. Okay, it's an empty string. So now we're going to copy this same thing and duplicate it. Okay, now all we need to do over here is to update this to something like original URL. Okay, and then over here we can just say set URL, and initially it's null. Okay, now the last one is going to be a list of the shortened URLs. Okay, shortened URLs. Should be shortened. Okay, URLs. I'll just make this URLs and then do something like set shortened URLs. Now this is going to be a list of URLs that we shall be picking from the database. Essentially, our main target is that if the user tries to shorten a given URL, but if we have it in the database, we shall populate a list of URLs that are shortened but aligned to that same URL. And over here we shall use this to populate our front end. Okay, we shall pretty much have down here we shall have a list of URLs. So that's what we are trying to do. So the user is going to make a post request, and that will be saved into the database, and then we can fetch data from the database, store them into these shortened URLs, and this will come along with the original URLs. I'll show you. This will make sense as we go forward. So let's go step by step and try to solve this. Okay, for now, let's try to get the custom name and original URL that the user is sending to us. Now, to do that is actually pretty simple. All we need to do is, by default, remember it's originally empty. So by default, get this name and add it as the value over here. Okay, and then get this original URL because it's empty, right? And where do we? Over here, and add it right there. Okay, however, the user is entering data into our database or into the form, and they need that to be updated. So how do we do that? To update from the null or empty string, okay, all we need to do is to add an on change. Okay, and on change, what do we have? What should happen? Remember, this is asynchronous, so we are gonna get an event, and that event, okay, will trigger something. Okay, because remember it's initially empty, so we need this to fire right away as the user enters this data into the field. So all we need to do is to set custom name. Is this the custom name? Yeah, custom name. And then that custom name should be whatever that updates. So let's say event that target that value. All right, I hope that pretty much makes sense. Remember, we started with a value that is originally empty, but if the user starts entering something, then we add an on change. And that onChange, since it's asynchronous, remember it's updating the current status, the current custom name that is empty, and it's grabbing the new values. Then now we're going to add an arrow function that is an event, and that event is triggering and updating. We're using the value or the value of that event, of that input, and using the set, this method, to update now the current value of the custom name. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to do the same thing over here. Remember, we said we have the original URL that is empty, and as soon as the user starts entering info, then we're tracking that if it changes, we should use the event of it changing and then set should be, what did we call it? Set URL to the event that target that value. So that's how we get the current, this is how we get the current value of an input field. And this is pretty much updating this original URL. So now that we have these two values updated, all we need to do is to come back over here. Remember, events are asynchronous, so we're going to add an async over here. Hold on. So before even the event, so this event is going to come with all this information from the form. So now over here we have we can just say that we form submitted, all right, with, we can do something like a JSON over here with can say custom name, custom, okay, hold on, we need a custom name that is custom name, all right, and then we have URL that is original URL. Okay, don't forget that. Oop. Let's name it something else. Original URL. Let's go to that. So this is a key value. All right. So now let's try to see if the user over here let's refresh that. So now, okay, try to minimize this. So now we have elite bytecode. Elite bytecode, and then some sort of URL. You can call it something like subscribe. Okay, and then notice what is going to happen here. All right, so we have the information that we need. Perfect. Now, if you feel this is really helpful to you right now, just go ahead, smash the like button and subscribe to the channel to make sure that you do not miss future projects like this. I'm giving away this project for free. You can add it to your resume and show off to your future employers that you can do real world applications. Now, let's get back to the video. Now that we have the data, we can actually fetch the data from the user. All we need to do right now is to make sure we populate the data over here. This is going to be coming from the database, but let's make sure the UI is set up so that by the time we set up the database, we are good to go. But for now, we know we can grab data from the user, and we're going to be using that data, send it to an API to the database, store it, and then later on fetch it and populate it to the user. All right, sounds good. Okay, so now to make sure that we can display the data that the user is actually fetching from the database, all we need to do honestly is just a few things. So right around here, just come over here and test the waters and add something simple, like something like all URLs. Okay, so that's not populating where we want it to be. All right, so all we need to do is to, let's see, form. All right, so what we're gonna do, get this, because this is actually a component for strictly fetching data and pushing it to the this is for posting the data. Okay, so we're gonna need a component right down here, okay, that is fetching the data from the database or URLs from their DB. Okay, so we have over here, so let's go ahead, because I thought this was column. Let's go ahead and just add, get rid of this, make sure that, yeah, get rid of this, get rid of that, and then, because remember we have all these should be in a, okay, I'll fix this. All right, now our main target is to, remember this is relative, and our main target is to pretty much just push, populate data just right below here, okay, and we are going to fix this. So all we're gonna do is to pretty much create a simple component that will fetch all the data from the database, and to do that is actually straightforward. We are gonna come over here and then create a component that will be something like all URLs, okay, and within there we shall have something like a page.js, and then again the same story, const all URLs, okay, and then equal to another function over there, and then it's gonna return some JSX in here. Don't forget the React fragment, all URLs, and then don't forget to export a default that is all URLs. Okay. All right, now that we come back over here, and all we simply need to do is to export all URLs. Perfect. All right, so now if we check our website, we still component, we still have that content. So now we can move away from here and come over here. So first thing we're gonna do is get in here and create some sort of div. Okay, and this div will have a class that has text in there that is gonna be about till 500 and a border top, and then a background of neutral that is about 100, and a padding of about 28, and the overflow Y, because they're gonna be a bunch of URLs that should be auto. So now if we come back over here and we add some sort of h1, so now we have all URLs. So let's see the status of our standing. Good, Perfect. So now it displays exactly where we wanted. Let's maximize this a bit. And perfect. All right. So we are gonna get in here and create some other div in here. Forget to close it. Then within here we have a class name, and we have a display of flex column, justify content, center, and obviously align items center, then content center, and then space y1, and on smaller screens we should have a margin top of about 32. Now within here we will have another div. Okay, so the importance of creating these divs is to get wrappers. Now the more you're breaking down your application, the more concise and clear it is whenever you're trying to debug it. I've seen several projects whereby it's a mess to just debug a simple div. All right, let's move forward. So we're going to have a display flex and flex column and justify content start, items start, and content should be at the start. All right, we're going to move forward and add a space between items vertically to be 1, and then the minimum height should be about custom 20 dvh. Right, and then we will finalize with an overflow y, because remember there's a bunch of URLs that are going to be listed vertically, and then the width should be about 80%. Now here is where we get to the nitty-gritties, and all we need to do is once we have the URLs coming from the database, remember I told you, so let's see, in the redirect form, so we're gonna move this because we're gonna display the URLs in the post form, so we're gonna move this, okay, and take it over here. This is gonna be our some sort of our fetch. Okay, so now use state, don't forget to import use state from React. Okay, so see how we are breaking down these things, and this is pretty much posting the data and this is fetching the data. Notice how clean, straightforward, and concise this is. Okay, so now we will start. So we're gonna come over here. Okay, so now that we have some sort of access, imagine that we already have data that is being stored. Here we shall create some API that will fetch data from the database. Do not worry about that. But the reason as to why I'm implementing this is that over here, take a look. So you can come in here and then create shortened URLs if they are available, and shortened URLs dot length, okay, is greater than 0. Okay, this is a conditional check. So something should happen here, else something else should happen here. Okay, I hope that makes total sense. All right, so we are, oh, there should be something that we are doing wrong here. So let's first minimize. Okay, all right, so whenever you do this is that you are checking for, you are writing JavaScript in within HTML. All right, so whenever you do this, it's because you are trying to write JavaScript within HTML. And this totally makes sense. So take a look. So in here, you can come over here, because this is the else part, okay? After the colon, the rest is an else part. So all you need to do is to come in here and write a div, because we know we're not fetching data from the database. So we just need to write a div. Make sure you are closing it, and then add a class. Okay, so something like flex row, justify content center, items center, and yeah, in here just go ahead and you can use a span, you can use a paragraph p tag, and remember this is self-closing, and then write something like no URLs generated. Okay, so far, or whatever you feel like. It can be your old code app, anything. All right, so I'm noting some squiggly lines in here. Let's see what's going on. Okay, yeah, this is just do not worry about that. We'll fix that. So yeah, we can get in here and do something. Okay, so if the shortened URLs are there already existing and they are, the length is, it's pretty much checking for the same thing. The length is more than 0, meaning it's pretty much saying if there are URLs in the database. So we are asking it to shortened URLs. We're going to get this, and then we're going to map through it. Okay, but before we map through it, we do not want to list everything from the database. Okay, what we're going to do is to filter. Okay, so we're going to say shortened URLs that filter. Okay, and then in here, so now we have a list of shortened URLs. So we're filtering for each URL, okay, that is in the shortened URLs. We are trying to check if that URL, that original, okay, so this is where we shall pass the original. Do not worry about it. Okay, so this is gonna be a name. Sorry, this is gonna be the name of the object coming from the database. This is where I wanted us to set up the database first. Okay, but at the moment, what we can do actually, let's just go ahead and list everything. Okay, we shall come back and update this because it doesn't make sense to write objects that are, I mean, variables that are coming from nowhere. So all we can do is, without even filtering, we can just say dot map. Okay, dot map with each shortened URLs that we shall name. Okay, it's just name it short URL. Okay, whatever we're finding from the database. In here we can write our div. Okay, so just write a div. So whenever you're mapping through things, you need a key. So that will be short URL, this key, short URL dot key or dot ID, because I think we're going to use MongoDB, so the IDs are named by that underscore. And then in here is where we are going to add our keywords. So we can pretty much name it something like short URL so you want to list the original URL that the user posted, and at the moment let's just do for example, let's imagine that we will name our URL, in the database we shall name it original URL. So imagine there is an original URL in the database. Okay, so URL which will be, so let me show you what we're trying to do. So we are getting, let's say, EBD and then subscribe, right? And all we're trying to do, So we'll go ahead here and display some something like, all right. So yeah, so at the moment, let's just, it's because over here we can use client. Yeah, that should solve it. So yeah, that should be, at the moment we do not have any URLs, honestly, so in the database, but this should be the main idea. So imagine if we, because we need to add the original URL. Okay, and so we need to add the original URL, and we can add the shortcode. This could be, we can name it something like shortened URL, okay, in the database. These are keys that are going to be coming from the database, all right? And yeah, so far that should do it, all right? That should do it. One thing we're going to do, we can actually add as well in this. So we can, yes, add that, but we can instead put it in some sort of span. Okay, and then we can get another span, but that span should be with a class of T 500 px line clamp 1. Okay, and so these are gonna make sense, honestly, when we yeah, let's even not even bother writing the copy button. So text, just doing this now so that it saves us time ahead. This is just pretty much CSS, but the logic behind is pretty much done. So in here, so since we want everything to be aligned well, so we can just come do medium on smaller screens. It should be width over half, I believe, and a space of X about 3, and display flex row, and justify content, center, between, and items center. All right, that should do it. So now let's go to the parent div. Okay, and within this, bear with me, we can just have a span that has a class name, and this should have the original URL. So now within here, the span can be of text that is pretty much about maybe blue. This is the original URL, and we do not want all the text to show, so we're going to clamp it to 1. Now when we get to the parent, okay, to wrapper, to the wrapper of the original URL, so we want on small screens to be the width full, and on medium screens we want a width of a half to pretty much match the other side, and then display flex direction row, and then justify content start justify start, and then item center. So now what we are left with is the parent. Okay, so take a look. This is actually what we're doing. So we have this whole wrapper that is holding two URLs. Okay, the original URL. So over here, when we display our URLs, we want the original URL to be over here and the shortened URL to be around here. So that is on medium to large screens. So each of those divs, these divs 1 and 2, should be a half. And then on smaller screens, it should cover up, the whole screen. So now to do that, we need to come to the parent, okay, to the parent div. And then in here, all we can do is to give a display flex and display flex column on smaller screens, but on medium, we should display row and then justify content between, and then items center, and then content center, and then the text by default that is in there should be 500, and then full width. Okay, so the few other things to pay attention to could be something like padding of 3, and then make sure the background is white. These you can tailor them to your needs. And then rounded maybe medium, and then we can actually add shadow. Okay, so to do that, we can add a shadow of neutral, and that could be about 500, and then drop that shadow of maybe medium. Okay, so the shadow color is neutral 500, and then the shadow itself to be activated, it should be that. So that's pretty much. So the next thing, we're going to go to the database, add a couple of things, and then make sure that we can also add an API that can be able to post data to the database, and then also fetch data from the database. And then lastly, we shall add a feature that can add, I think it's going to be in here. Yeah, we shall add a feature that can copy the URL from the shortened URL, and then that way you can paste it wherever you want. So see you in the next video. Bye bye. All right, guys, now the next thing we're gonna do is to connect to a database, and the database we're gonna use is MongoDB. So to do that, we need to install a package called MongoDB. So npm install MongoDB, and as we wait for that to install, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna go all the way in the root directory of our app, and then create a folder called lib. All right, and then within here we are gonna create a file called MongoDB. All right, within here, so now our app package is installed, looks good. So now within here, what we're gonna do is to import that package, and from MongoDB. In order to connect to a database, we need a Mongo client. Now, I have walked through this over and over in all my previous projects, and if you need some more clarification on that, just go ahead and go to the previous project where I built a task management system, and you'll find a detailed walkthrough of what each and everything does. Now, I'll speed up this real quick. And pretty much what's going on here is that we are creating a variable URI, and this is what's going to be connecting to a database. It's pretty much a URI that MongoDB gives us in order to connect to their database. It consists of the username, it consists of the password, and we need to store that in an env file. So now go ahead and create an env file. Just call it .env.local. All right, and then within here, remember we used our name to be this. Now come over here and equate it to something. Now some other env URLs that we're gonna need are the one that connects to the API, and the other is the main base URL, which is local, which is pretty much this. So now go ahead and copy this and pretty much equate it to that. All right, and this also will go to that, but this time round it will go to the API, and we shall call our API shorten. All right, now this is what we do not have yet, and we shall go ahead in MongoDB and get that URI. But at the moment, let's go ahead and walk through what's going on here. So we need the URI, which we're going to instantiate pretty soon, and we need the options, we need a client, and we need a client promise. Okay, so now over here we're trying to check if the URI exists, and if it does, if it does not exist, we're gonna pretty much throw an error. But if it does exist and we are in development mode, we're gonna go ahead and use the Mongo client to create this connection to the database. Otherwise, if we have already made a connection to the database, all we need to do is to just go ahead and return whatever we are fetching from the database. Otherwise, if we're in production, then we're going to make a connection to the database, and pretty much that will be it. Right, now that we are done with that, we're going to go ahead and create our API. Now, real quick, what you're going to do, you're going to go in your root directory and then just create a pages folder. And then within pages, you will create a folder called API. Now this is how Next.js figures out that, hey, you're creating an API, and this is what makes Next.js full stack. Now within API, the next one is pretty much the name of the endpoint. All right, we're gonna call ours shorten. All right, okay, so now what does this mean? This means that over here, when you are trying to make an HTTP request, this is what you're going to be pinging to. So you're going to call API, which is this folder, and then shorten. So if you give this another name, it should be the same thing updated over here. So now let's go ahead now within our API, just go ahead and create our main API. So now this is going to consist of the get request that fetches all data from the database and the post. Now remember, if you are creating an API that is dynamic and dependent on the ID of the object that you're trying to fetch from the database, what you will use instead is the square brackets. So you will do, in fact, as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and create that as well. So this is how you create a dynamic, all right, endpoint that is going to ping to the database based on the ID of the object. So let's say you are trying to, if we come over here in our, so let's say over here, if you're trying to ping to object ID 5, now it will be pinging to this. But the general rule of thumb is that use index or route.js, depends on the naming. I've been using index.js, that has worked for me, no issues so far. You can go ahead and use route.js, but this is what has worked for me. So for example, let's say we are trying to fetch all data from the database. We need to ping to this endpoint, all right, and that's going to be over here. All right, that will fetch everything from the database. You do not need to rely on the ID. I hope that clears out everything. So now let's go ahead and create our API. So we're going to create the get that fetches everything from the database and the post. I will start with the post because we want to make sure we add data to the database. All right, so now the first thing we are gonna do is to, now that we created these folders, let's go to MongoDB and create our database. All right, so now I'll quickly open up here and then log on to MongoDB. Now go ahead and log in. Now as soon as you log in, go ahead and create your I was testing this. Let's go ahead and add a new project. and call it Shrivel. All right. Then press next. Then create project. Now, once you've created a project, go ahead and create your first cluster. Now you need to remember these names because you will need them. So the cluster, so make sure you choose the free version. You can name it Shrivel cluster. Now this will be appended to the URL endpoint that connects to the database. We will get that, don't worry about that. So choose your nearest region. I'll choose Virginia and then create. And then copy this password because you'll need it. Then create a database. Then choose a connection. I'll choose drivers. And then yes, we've already installed MongoDB. And then done. Wait for it to be created. As that is being created, just come back over here in our, I'll close this real quick. Close out everything so we are left with the endpoint because we're going to need the URL over here and then the API and the dynamics. So go ahead and close the rest of the things. So let's create an endpoint. The HTTP for post and get, fetch all data from the database. And it's going to be asynchronous and then a function, give it a name, something like handler. And now this will take two parameters, a request and a response. All right. So now within here, this is where we're going to need a couple of things. Okay. So we will need a Mongo client. All right. So this is Mongo client is equal to await client promise. All right. And then the other thing is that go ahead and turn these off. So the other thing is that we're going to need a database name, which is equal to the client we just created. All right. Dot DB. And then in here is where we are going to add the database name. So in the meantime, let's call it URL ShrivelDB. All right, ShrivelDB. Now remember this name. This must be the same name we add when we get to creating our database in MongoDB. So the next thing, lastly, is the connection to the database. So we will have the collection which is equal to DB that we just created dot collection. Now over here we will need the collection. I'll show you all these when we jump back to MongoDB. So I'll name this Shrivel collection. All right. So now that we have those, next things are going to be to create our post request. And then later on, our fetch/get request. Now let's just jump back to MongoDB and see our status. All right. So now that we have these two things all together, what we're going to do, first of all, is to create a database because we do not have a database. All right. So now to do that, first of all, let's go over here. So this is our cluster. Let's go over here and then copy this connection string. All right. Now remember it has a data password over here. Earlier on, we had to copy that password. So come back over here in here and then just add this connection string. Now take note over here is where we're gonna add our our password that we copied earlier. Remember I told you to copy it over here. So now that we have that in check, save that. All right, remember the cluster name that we created, so all that gets appended in here. So we have the URL and the MongoDB URL connection string, and so far we should be good to go. So now when we jump back over here, we just need these names. So we need the database name and the collection name. So come back to over here. So we are done with that. So get in here to add data and then create a database. All right. So create a database. So the database name, come back in here. Remember our database name is ShrivuDB. I add these DBs so that I do not forget what I'm naming what. So the collection name is that, and I'll show you why we actually do that. So all right, so now that we have everything in check, you can go ahead and read these. But what I'm gonna do is to create database. Voila. So now the reason as to why I told you add the actual name of what you're trying to create, because at one point, if you forget them, those two names are over here. We have the database and we have the collection. So just in case you forget, you can figure out which is which from over here. All right. Now that we've created all these, now we are good to go. Jump out of here until we make our first post request. So get back into over here. We have a connection to the database. We have a Mongo client, so things should be sweet. So now let's go ahead and create our first post request. All right. So to do that, we're going to say if. Remember, when we make a request to this handler, to the API, we are making this request, okay? So now the thing is that we need to check if the request, because remember, we're going to use one file to check for get and post. So if request method is equal to, all right, is equal to something like post, okay, do something, all right, else if request, else if the request that method is equal to get for everything, do something. Otherwise, for the rest of the other methods, like the IDs or anything, remember, if it's ID, it's just automatically going to go to this one. But if there's any other method that does not match, all right, it will just get a response, that status, all right, that method will let the user know that that method is not found or it's not authorized. All right, .json, and then all we need to do is to add an error message, all right, that says method not allowed. Right, you can go ahead and capitalize all this. All right, seems that we are on a good start. All right. Okay, sweet. So let's go ahead and now fix this because we want to make sure that we test our API and make sure that it can add data to the database. So first things first, let's try to fetch data from the database. And how we do this is actually pretty much simple. We're going to say that const all URLs, all right, await collection. This is the collection that we made because this is what's going to ping to the database. We're going to say collection dot find everything from the database and then convert it into an array. That's pretty much it. And then we're going to return a response, that status, which is 200, all right, that convert everything to JSON, all right, and then add a method within there with a message that says all tasks, all right, all URLs, and then comma, just make this a small, and then comma, data is equal to these URLs. All right. So why are we doing this? All right. The reason as why we're doing this is that when we make a post request, this is our vision. When we make a post request, we want the user to send their custom name and to send the original URL. All right. Now we will add logic in the backend that will tailor that original URL and customize it, shorten it, and store it in the database alongside that original URL and the custom domain. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to have 3 columns in the database: custom name, actually 4, the ID of the URL, the custom name, the original URL, and then the shortened URL. All right. So now when we are returning all these, we want all those 4 things to be bundled up and be returned in an object. All right. That way, when we are manipulating our front end, we just pick out whatever we need, all right, to show to the user. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now let's go ahead and create our post request. Now our post request is also going to be straightforward. What we're going to do is to create what we're going to do is that when the user makes what we're going to do is going to be straightforward. When the user makes a post request, we are receiving a couple of things: the original URL and the custom name. So now what we're going to do is that request comes as a body. All right. And all we can do is to destructure that original URL, all right, and their custom name. Okay. And now those should be coming from, because what are we destructuring? Request that body. All right. Now that we have those 2 together, all we can do now is pretty much straightforward. We can make a post request that shortcode is equal to, and then all we can do is to process .env .next public, right, base URL. All right, and then in here we can add a custom name. All right, remember to add a $sign over here to tell you that this is a variable, and then add another $sign, which will now be equal to the shortened URL. Now to shorten a URL, all we need to do is actually straightforward. We're going to use nanoid. All right. And to do that, let's go ahead over here. So we can use nanoid. All right. If you go over here, nanoid, and go ahead and read about this. So nanoid is a tiny, secure, URL friendly, unique string ID generator for JavaScript. So what happens is that you give it a range of characters. So let's say 7, and then when it receives any string, it's going to auto generate a string of characters of about 7. I'll show you this shortly. Let's go ahead over here and create a split screen. And then all we need to do is npm install nanoid. Now while that installs, that was quick. Come over here and import nanoid from nanoid. All right, and then in here all you're gonna do is say nanoid, all right, and then give it the size of the string. So right, we're gonna use 7. So now what happens is that when you make a post request from the front end, our aim is to generate a URL based on our domain that has the custom name and the shortened generated string of characters, and we're going to store that in the database. Now remember, we're going to have this shortened URL plus the original URL and the custom name. Now whenever we're trying to display or redirect the user, we shall always compare that nanoid to whatever is in the database, the shortened URLs. So whichever URL that matches that nanoid, we shall now fetch the original URL of that shortened URL. I guess that makes sense. So think about it. You have a shortened URL, and if you want to identify it in the database, all you need to do is to compare that nanoid, because it's going to be unique. You're going to get the nanoid in the database that matches that custom shortened URL, and then we will look for the original URL that belongs to that exact shortened URL, and that will be it. So that will be used to redirect the user. We shall see this in action shortly. All right, so pretty much what we're doing here is the generated string of characters is going to be of length 7. So now that we have that, now we need to store this in the database. And how to do that is to pretty much use a try catch statement, and then in here there's going to be an error, and then just return something. So in the meantime, let's go over here, and then the error is response that status, and that status will be something like server error dot JSON. All right, and then within here we will have the error message and something that belongs to, we can come up with like failed to shorten URL. All right, and then this is status, and then over here, if everything checks out, all we're gonna do is to create an object within here that is the new URL data. All right, that is pretty much gonna consist of the original URL from the user. All right, which is equal to so this is what's going to be saved in the database. So to make it unique, all you can do is to do something like original URL, and then this is what's coming from the user. All right, comma, this is, we're sending a JSON object, and then the shortened URL, let's make this underscore, which is going to be equal to the short code, this one. All right, this going to be created over here and saved in the database, then comma, then we would love to track the time that was created, so created that, and that will be a new date, that to I think we can use ISO string. So that's going to create the current date based on our time zone. So okay, looks good to me. So now that we've created that object, we need to send this in the database, and to do that, it's actually pretty simple. All you need to do is to const, then insert the new URL being created, which is equal to the await collection dot insert one. All right, insert one. All right, and then all we need to pass is the new URL data, and that's it. All right, so now we need to respond to the user, that response.status. So this should be insert, so response.status that, hey, we have created the object.json, and then just go ahead and add a message that says something like new URL created successfully. All right, and then you can maybe show them what is actually being created. So data is equal to the insert new URL. All right, this very object. That's pretty much all right. So now if everything has been implemented as we expect, I want this to keep on one line so that does not confuse anybody. So if everything checks out, we should be good to go. So now let's go ahead and I think we created this. This should be it, honestly, guys. That's it. So let's go ahead and pull up Postman. So Postman, all right, we have our API already. So if we try to, I'll minimize this. All right, if we try to fetch all the data from the database, all right, so we have an error. So let's go ahead and track what's actually going on. So we have 300 API shorten. All right, so let's see. Come over here. Okay, so shorten API is not found. So let's see what is actually happening. Let's come over here. So we have our endpoint. Get this, make sure that it matches. All right, that could have been the issue. So let's go ahead and try to make a fetch request again. So it's not found again. We could be, so API.shorten. Okay, so it's not found. All right, so the reason as to why we are not finding anything is because of the way we are implementing our URL. So since this is a string literal, so, and this is JavaScript, honestly, it's not an actual string, plain string. So go ahead and add that over there and that over there. Okay, so yes, so the process.env, that is actually JavaScript in play. So yeah, if fingers crossed, everything should be okay. Hold on, where is our Postman? Okay, this is what we're looking for, and make sure we open that and Postman. So go ahead and fetch this. Again, we still have, so where could our issue be? So come back over here and take off that. That could be the issue, the trailing forward slash, because we honestly have, I think what's happening is that that forward slash is coming in here, all right, and adding 2 forward slashes. Okay, so yeah, so make sure you fix that. All right, so now come back over here and make the request. We are still getting, all right, we are still getting that. So let's go step by step and figure out what is actually happening. All right, guys, so the issue is nothing but it's just a simple stopping your server and then rerunning again. All right, there is no issue with our implementation. Everything should be fine. Just go ahead and stop the server and rerun it again. You will be able to get your updates. So right now, if we come to over here and try to fetch data from the database, everything should be updated. So we have all the URLs. All right, so now let's go ahead, since we already created the add URL. So let's go ahead. Remember, we said over here that the values that we are receiving from our user should be original URL and shortcode. I'm sorry, original URL, okay, and custom name. So yes, so this is what we're receiving from the user. So make sure in your testing, I'll minimize this. So make sure when you're testing, those 2 variables are implemented. So we do not need the date. All you need to do, because the date is auto-generated from the backend, all you need to do is to give it a URL and the custom name. All right, and then if you make a post request over here, we have an issue. All right, so let's see what the issue is and try to trace it down. So we said that what we are receiving is original URL. All right, so original URL, and we are receiving a custom name. All right, so when we come over here, we have the custom name. All right. So let's see. So in here, we have implemented that. Okay, looks good to me. Custom name, then the nanoid, and for some reason we so when we get over here, we are reassigning everything, shortcode, shortened, all right, and then created that. Okay, and inserting this object into the database, and if everything checks out, then we will have the insert new URL object, and otherwise it will fail. Okay, so let's see what's going on in here. So it says post is not found. Okay, so let's see. So yes, we are making a post request, and so our get checks out. So response. So let's try to see what could be going on over here. So date, we need this date function. Okay, so we did not implement the date. There we go. So over here, we forgot to add that date. So there was an error within the creating the date object. So let's go back and go to Postman and try to, so due to caching, you can stop the server and restart it again, and then make sure everything in here is saved. So go to Postman and try to, oh, there we go. So now we are able to create that. So the issue was pretty much about the date object. All right, so now if we go over here and try to fetch all our data, we should be able to find our shortened URL. I mean, this is pretty much longer than the original, but you get the point. So this, supposing this was a longer URL, we would have our logic in place. So the date is also created, and we should be good to go. Okay, moving forward, what we can do is now to go over and create these dynamic API requests. So the next thing we can do is to pretty much create those dynamic API endpoint requests. And all we can do, honestly, is going to be the same thing: export default async, and then the function, and we can call it handler. And remember, this receives a request and responds with a response. All right, so first things first, we need to connect to the database, and we are gonna go back over here, make access to the MongoDB, and make sure that we have this. Now in this, all we are gonna do is to pretty much just fetch items from the database. We are not gonna let users to edit their URLs. Once it's created, that's it. Okay, so we've imported Mongo client promise from MongoDB, and so the next thing we're gonna do is to pretty much now get the ID from the query. So now remember what we created here. If you create slug, that's what you're trying to fetch from the URL. You see that over here, the endpoint is being created for you. So you see API shorten that ID. So for example, if you are fetching a single item by a unique ID name, so let's say slug or post name or something, so it should be unique. That's what you are going to query, because you're trying to get that parameter from the URL. And to do that in React, all you need to do is to say const, we are trying to get this ID, this name must match this file. If you say slug over here, when you're destructuring and looking for the parameter, you are looking for that actual slug as well. So equals to the request. Now when you make a request, that request, since it comes instantiated within this ID square bracket, now you just need to query that request, and that's it. That's how you get the ID from a request. What do I mean? So if you come over here in Postman, over here, this slug or ID over here is what we are querying over here. All right. So if we make a request, this is the whole request. Everything else is manual, but this ID over here is this ID in here that is dynamic, and we are fetching it from that query. All right, I hope that makes sense. So that is always unique in the database, and whenever we are finding something, we need to make sure that we query for any data issues. So let's say invalidity. So let's say we do not have that ID. All right, all we need to do is to return a statement that says response.status, and then in here something like a not found, right? .json, all right, and then just simply add a message that URL or object not found, or let's say missing object or missing ID from the query or something like that, all right? However, if right outside here, if everything checks out, all right, and the request, now in here we are not making post requests, we are not making put requests to customize or update. All right, so if the ID is valid, all right, this is going to be skipped, and then we're going to check if now the user is making a valid get request. Okay, so because remember the ID over here, you can make a valid HTTP, all right, and the ID could be present, but this could be a put or a delete, right? So we do not want people to delete stuff from our database. We shall do that ourselves. All right, okay, so now we are checking if the request is get, all right, then now that's when we're going to do some good business. So all we need to do is to try and catch. All right, make sure you do not forget in here that we have an error. All right, so in here we could do something like response.status, all right, something like maybe not found, okay, .json, and this is in here. We're going to pass a message, something like yes, did not find the URL data object in the DB. All right, and then you can pretty much just add that error as well. All right, okay. Otherwise, if everything checks out, and really honestly the request is a get request and the ID is present, now this is where we're going to go ahead and find that ID. So all you need to do is pretty much create some sort of like the URL item that is in question, and all we shall do is await, and then the collection dot find. So we're using MongoDB here, dot find one. And what are we finding? So we are finding, remember, if you come in here in let's go back over here, if we are querying the database, specifically MongoDB, their ID key is written like this. So come over here and paste it over here. All right, however, what we're finding, okay, let me break this down step by step. So remember, we found that ID. That's what we are questioning from. We are fetching from the user's query. All right, that's how it comes from the body, from the front end. So we are looking for this ID, but MongoDB does not know this key. So all we need to do is look it up. All right, compare. All right, these two IDs. So this is for the user and this is what's actually in the database. Now, since this is coming from the user, all we need to do is to convert it into an object. All right, and then object ID Why? So I'm going to show you simply why. All right. So make sure you destructure this. All right, this is what we are looking for. All right, so it's like you're creating a JSON object and you are looking for this ID, converting it into an object ID and comparing it to what's actually in the database. Why? Because in here, if we come to MongoDB, our database over here, so now that we have some data in here, browse collections. All right, in here, if you try to see the types, this is an object ID. All right, so we're trying to compare. In here, it's a string and it's being converted into an object ID because the underscore ID is type object ID. Hope that clears out everything. All right, so now I'm going back over here. So yes, if we found it, if like, this URL item is being found in the database, all right, so all we can do is to respond dot status in here and then do something like it has been found. All right, dot JSON and then the message in here, and we could say something like found the URL object or whatever data. Okay, and you can pretty much as well show it to the user as well by URL item. All right, in between here, what if it's not found? Right, so here we're trying to query, find it in the database, and then we need to check if it's not found before we do anything. If it's not found, URL item is not found, all we need to do is return a response that status, all right, of 404 that JSON, and then message in here, message of your data object was not found in the database. And that is pretty much it. Remember, we are checking if we have a GET request, all right? We do not want anything else. So all we need to do is else. We do not want users to update, like put methods and whatnot. Else, all we need to do is to say response dot status. Okay. In here, we can use a 400 of not method not allowed, right? And then we can update a message, then something like method is not allowed. All right. All right, so now that we have this set up, let's go ahead and test our data in here. So come over here. So hold on, let's get over here, get this object ID, and then come over here and then just populate it right there. Okay, it's a bad request. Did not find the URL data object. Okay, let's see, save. Okay, again, let's go over here. Doop, doop, stop, rerun it. Okay, then test. Okay, we have a bad request. Let's see what we are doing wrong. Let's see. So if this is not found, what are we getting here? Did not find the data object. Okay, so let's rerun this. So there we are. So we have this. Come over here, shorten. Okay. We should not be getting, what are we getting? Did not find the URL data object. So let's see, where are we going wrong here? So let's see, const your await find one. Yes, we are filtering through. So the new object ID, is this converted? So we need to import this object, so yeah, go ahead and import this because looks like it's not being converted. So import object ID from MongoDB. All right. Yes, do not worry about this. This is why using WebStorm is actually better, because it would tell you this straight away right off the bat. So now that we are checking for that, if it's not found, and then return not found. Oh, this should be 400 actually. So that's not found. All right, response. Actually, if it's found, do that. And if there's any other error, should display that. Otherwise, the rest of the other messages should be 404. Okay. Let's see. Actually, 405. So if there's an error, it should be 500. Could be internal server error. Found method not allowed. So over here, yes, 500. Anything else that stands out? So this should be 4,000. That missing ID. Yes, missing ID. Otherwise, this is 404. Object is not found in the database. And yeah, internal server error, and then method not allowed. So let's go ahead and double check if now we are able to find this. So go ahead and stop this. Come back over here and then try to find that object. So now we find the object. So it was an issue of allocating the right HTTP status codes. Okay, so other than that, we are good to go. So now that we are able to make post requests, we should go to the front end and be able to create the user interface that interacts with our database and pretty much populates the database straight up. All right, see you in the next chapter. All right, now we are going to the front end of this application and help our users to send data to the database. Now to do that, remember we had a form that we created. Just go ahead over here where we created our console. We were able to get data from the user and we were console logging it. Now this time around, we're going to send it to the database. And to do that, just go ahead and use your try catch. Okay, just go ahead and do that. Remember, this comes with an error, and then all you need to do in the error, you can alert, you can use an alert, you can do whatever you want, but for this time around, I'll use a throw new error, and then pretty much do something like write the error, or we can actually just use a string literal and then say something like failed to add URL to the database, and then pretty much just add on the actual error. Okay, all right, so I'll go ahead and snooze this, snooze that. Okay, now let's get in here and write our logic. All right, now to do that, honestly, it's pretty much straightforward. All you need to do is to create a const, all right, post response, all right, and then that should equal to await, then use a fetch request. Okay, now this fetch request will take in an API endpoint and the actual method. So in here we can say method is actually a post method, and the content type, headers Oh, what in the world? And then the headers will be of content type. All right. That is JSON. Okay. So in here, just do that. And this is actually application slash JSON, just like that. Make sure you end with a comma, because we have the last one that actually does the logic. We have body, and the body is actually JSON dot stringify, right? Stringify, and then in here is where we pass our data. So we have original URL plus and the custom name. All right, now there's several ways of doing this. So in here we're going to add our API, but there's several ways of doing this. Oh, that's not there. We can as well just create an object over here and then just pass it at once. So you can do something like const URL data, all right, and then go ahead and pass it here. But then that means you're going to change the logic on how that data, you need to destructure that data when you come over here. So you'll do like if you did something like you're sending the actual body, so you'll need to come over here and do something like URL data dot and then break it down, because now you're trying to break down the JSON object, right? Okay, so we need an API over here because we are actually sending the data, which is good, and we need an API over here. Now to do that, all you need to do is to come over here, all right? All you need to do is to come over here and then do something like a const. Let's make it global const the API, which is equal to process.env dot. Now you can come back to your local variable. This is the API that we need. All right. Make sure you specifically copy that one, because if you don't, you're going to get some issues. All right. So API, all right, you can name it API URL, whatever you want. Okay, so now notice that it's complaining here that, it's supposed to be asynchronous. Now to solve that, just come over here, because this is the method calling it, and make this asynchronous. All right, so we are good to go. So now this is going to be sending data to the database. However, if things do not go right, so let's say if the past request dot okay, but this time round is not okay, so this should be something like a server error or something, right? So in here, this is where you are going, all right, to throw something like throw new error, and then do like some string literal, something like failed to add URL to the DB, all right? And then go ahead and add the status, all right? So you can do post response dot status, okay? Something like that. So this, go ahead and add it right there. Okay, all right, so you can also just do that, whichever you need. This is just formatting. Okay, so we're getting the status of what is actually happening. Okay, all right. Otherwise, if everything checks out, all right, if everything checks out, just go ahead and save the data. All right, save the data Because remember, when we make a post request, let me show you something. Honestly, we don't need to return anything per se, okay? Because we're just making a post request. So we shall not do anything. But if you want to see what's actually happening, just if you want to make sure that, for the most part, you're not, you can just do maybe an alert, something like an alert, okay? So let's do an alert. Or we can actually redirect, not even redirecting, because this is just a single page, but let's imagine you have several pages and you have a different page that adds data to the database. Let's say you have a pop-up, a form. So this is where you add the logic, like maybe close the pop-up or route the user to a different page. So this is pretty much, you're in rare cases going to show a feedback of some sort that, hey, this is the object that we created. You can just send a message that, hey, it has been created. Okay, yeah. So if everything checks out, just go ahead. I'll probably remove this, but just add an alert. Or you can actually add, actually, to spice things up, you can, let's do something over here. You can add a message. Let me show you the real world case scenario of how you can use this. So you can do something like added URL, okay, and then something like set added, or something like status, okay. Let's like post status, that makes sense. Set post, all right, set post status, okay. And this by default you can use state, and then it could be something, it could be empty, right, for starters. Okay, so now that you have that, so you can come over here and then say something like give it a message of something like post URL added successfully, something like successfully. All right, so now then you would use this, all right, to come over, like let's go to our front end. So you can, let's say, somewhere like here, or just above here, or whichever, or it could be above here, whatever you want, right? Or somewhere here. Okay, so let's go ahead and just add it somewhere here. All right, so this div, we can make a class. So we can make a class name, right, of display flex row, okay, justify item center or between, right, and items center, okay, and then we can add like a space in between them of about 2, or you can use a gap, okay, and then this is the button, and then over here you can add a tiny span of class name, something like text extra small, and then a text like a TL of something like that, and then we can add the status. Okay, all right, so initially it's not gonna be there, all right, so it's nothing is gonna pop up, all right, because why? Because it's empty. So let's say if you wrote here like empty, take a look, it will be created over there, right? But we do not want that to display. It's going to be empty initially. And now if we make a post request, that should pop up. So let's make it a little bit more tiny. So let's say you can, let's say 2 pixel. It's going to be super tiny, but let's add something over here. Okay, that's super tiny. So let's make it like 8 pixels, or maybe 12, maybe 10, maybe 12. All right, and then try to make this something like 4. Okay, sounds good. So let's create font, semi-bold. Okay, now go ahead and take this. So fingers crossed that we are sending the right data to the database. Okay, so now let's go ahead and look up something. Let's go ahead over here, and I'm really interested into a long. So let's go to Google News. All right, and pick out something very okay that is long enough actually. Okay, let's just pick out that and close the rest of these. Come back over here and then just say news, post the URL. Okay, and now we can add a timer here. All right, we can set a timer on this. All right, because now it's going to be there forever. You can set a timer on this, but I'm just showing you how you can see create it successfully. All right, cool. Now if we come to the database, now we should have 2 of them. Perfect. All right, so we have the longer URL and the shorter URL. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and move to the next step in the next chapter. In the next video or next series or next chapter, whichever way you're watching this, we are going to create a logic that displays all the URLs from the database to the user. And we'll add a timeout for this. All right, see you in the next chapter. All right, guys, in the previous video, I pretty much showed you how to make post requests from the front end. Now, in this video, we're going to go ahead and go to showing all the data from the database onto the front end of the user experience. Now, before that, in the previous video, I left you with a task of pretty much setting a timeout for a pop-up message. And if you got any challenge to do that, just simply go ahead and use JavaScript's set timeout. And all you need to do, because I believe this is where I left you, whereby these words are staying on the front end permanently, but all you can do is use JavaScript's set timeout, which is an asynchronous function, so it expects to do something thereafter. So what you do is to pass in your message and with your function, that could be an arrow function, and then set a delay. So in other words, this will execute after 2 seconds have passed. All right, and then the other thing is that after successfully submitting your form, the other thing you want to do is to reset the form. So now if we come over here and pass in something like set news, and then pass in some sort of like random long URL. So for example, let's get something like this, and then come over here and paste that. So we will get a pop-up, and then bam, we'll reset everything. However, in the database, we will have, if I reset this, refresh this, we will have posted something new right around here. Okay, so let's go ahead real quick and be able to show our data on the front end. So just go ahead. Remember, we stopped somewhere because we were trying to populate data from the database, but we did not have data yet at that point. So remember here, this component that is all URLs, remember this. So we pretty much just created a use state that is holding all the URLs, but we do not have these URLs. So real quick, I just made a few changes to our application in order to accommodate our features that whenever the user clicks on the shorten button, we are able to get a pop-up of all the URLs, a list of all the URLs that are in the database. Now, real quick, I remember I had told you to add the all URLs component over here. Now we're going to move this because we want this all URLs to be dependent on the button over here in the post form. Okay, now real quick, go into your post form, and that's where we're going to fetch all the data. Okay, so I'm very sure that I walked you through the process of making a post request. So all you gotta do is to add within the handle user input, which makes the post request, because we implemented this together. Now we want immediately after the user makes a post request and adds data into the database, there and then, if everything is successful, there and then, I mean, the timer obviously is gonna pop up. Now immediately thereafter, we are gonna return a list of data, return all URLs from the DB. Okay, now to do this, it's pretty much straightforward and simple. All you need to do is to create, most people name this response, but I want to make a difference between this and this. So we're getting data from the database, so I'm naming it get response is equal to await fetch. Then the API is pretty much the same thing that we did, and then the method is get. Okay, make sure you have a difference between this and this. That's what tells our HTTP requests what we are trying to do. Then obviously add on if the get request is not okay, if it's not fine, if something is wrong in the database, then return an error. Otherwise, if everything is okay, return all data in JSON format. Okay, remember that is asynchronous. Okay, because this is all under the asynchronous function, and then store all that in the get URLs. All right, response get URLs. However, remember when we are saving data into the database, we return it into a data fragment. Real quick over here, if we go into, I think I've talked about this before, but real quick in here, if we go into index and you see our response, see over here, we return all these URLs into a data fragment. Okay, so if we go back to our redirect, so we are posting data and we are fetching data within the post component. Okay, all right, so the form that is making the post request is where we are adding both of our responses. Okay, and then remember I told you this is just destructuring. Okay, because the data is returned in a JSON format and it's in the variable or key. Actually, this time around it is in the key data, so we destructure it and store that into the response get URLs. Then thereafter we have a state that is holding a list of all URLs that are from the database. Okay, so I named it get URLs. This is fetching everything like in the database, like each URL object that consists of the time, the shortened URL, and the original URL. Okay, yeah, so then originally it's empty. This is how we initiate it using use state. Then if everything is fetched from the database, it's going to be stored in the set get URLs. All right, now that we have that data stored into the get URLs, all we're going to do is going to be straightforward. We are going to add this component. Remember, this component was originally here because we want one component to handle both the fetch and the post, so we are embedding it within this form. And since we have access now to all the URLs, we're going to use props to send this data that is already fetched into our sub component, which is all URLs, and it's going to be identified as all URLs. Okay, so this is the actual data and this is the all URLs that is going to be sent to the child component called all URLs. Okay, this is the component again, this is the data, and this is the property or argument that is passed on to the child component. Now as I'm going to explain to you later on, we are also going to need this original URL because we need, at the point of fetching data and comparing it and listing it on the front end, we will need to compare it at one point. Okay, so this is from the input field the user just entered, because we want the user to get a list of all those shortened URLs that are in relation to the original URL. Okay, we don't want to list all URLs that are in the database that are not even connected to the current input URL. I hope that makes sense. But to sum it up, we want the user to put in the URL, and if there is any URL in the database that matches that current URL, we want to list all the shortened URLs that the user has always posted in our database. Okay, I hope that makes sense. When we get to that step, it will make more sense, but make sure you add both of these variables. And if we go to the child component, we are going to this structure. Now let's get back to the video where I walk you through how all this makes sense. When we get into the child component that is receiving the arguments, make sure that these key properties or values that you sent, or arguments you can call them, that you sent, match these keys. They should be exact, otherwise you're not gonna receive the data. Okay, don't use these variables or values stop in this component. Now this is what is passed on to this component. This all URLs, check the spelling, careful with the spelling. This original URL is what is going to be passed on to the all URLs component. Okay, and then now we're going to go ahead and walk through all these other steps like I will show you in the next video. Now, if you see anything in the next part, if you see anything like all shortened URLs, ignore it. This is the patch that is going to make sense. And yeah, just go ahead and use this step. Do not add any. If you see anything over here within the all URLs component that is implementing shortened URLs, ignore it. We've already fetched the data from this component and we have access to it. Now we can go ahead and map and filter and reverse and then do all the rest. Now let's get back to the video and figure out how to do this. I just instantiated everything as we were earlier, updated the placeholders and showed you how you can map over. So now the current logic over right now just fetches everything from the database as soon as the user clicks on the shorten button. Okay, so now we're going to update this real quick. If you're still stuck in here and you need some more clarification on how to fetch data and map it through on the user, just go ahead and let me know down in the comments below. I can walk you through how to do it. I can just create another video where I show you how to fetch data from the database and populate it on the front end. All right, so now that we have all these all set up, the next thing we can do is to pretty much, because we want the current, at the moment it's displayed from oldest to newest. Now we do not want the user to scroll all the way down to look for their current shortened URL. So now what we can do, we can come over here and add a reverse. Okay, this is one, shorten that. Okay, it's displaying everything from the database. Let's see. So 2, shorten that. Okay, that is showing up all the way down. All right, we will fix that without any issues. Okay, all right, so let's first go ahead and filter out only things that we need. Okay, so to do that, we have the original URL. So we have the original URL and we can use that to come over here, right here, and then say all URLs. Okay, dot filter, that's what we need first, and then this will take in an argument. All right, so let's call it URI, and then we are gonna ask it that for each URI that original URI, check if it is equal to, strictly equal to, the original URL that we just passed over here from the user field. So honestly, what we're trying to do over here is we're mapping through all the, before we map through all the URLs, we are checking if in all those URLs in the database, we're filtering out that for each URL, check if the original URL matches the current one that is from the input field over here. If it matches, then reverse, like pretty much map over, but in reverse order. Okay, hope that makes sense. Okay, so now when we come over here and let's get something like, so we're not gonna get everything from the database. Let's get something like EBD, and then just go on Google and search anything Next.js. So let me just get this URL actually. So come over here and then try to shorten it. All right, so now we are getting, because this URL is not in the database yet. All right, so that's why we are getting on this. We're not getting all the local hosts, the early ones that we're populating over here. So now let's get this one. Doesn't matter if it is too short. And then come over here and then see, now we have something better at the moment. So let's come back over here, copy this, and then come back over here. All right, and all right, let's populate it. So now we have 2. Okay, so now look at how our effect is now in place. So the latest URL is over here, is at the top. So let's get 3. All right, so pretty much that is working as we expected. If you're having any issues, just let me know in the comments below, and I can walk you through step by step, or go down in the description below, get the repository. Just remember to give us a star, because we put a lot of effort when recording these videos, and give us a star on our GitHub repository. Plus follow along, click the bell icon so that you get updates whenever we drop a new video, and also share with your friends and let them know that, hey, this is the latest on Next.js, and yeah, we're building things. So click the subscribe button, and see you in the next part, where we are going to add the logic that is going to copy these URLs over here, and then you can now paste them in a new in anywhere on your web platform. That way it makes sense that you can only just use this, and then it should route you back to this. Because at the moment, if you copy this and paste it over here, we do not have the logic yet that maps this URL to the original URL. So see you in the next one. So real quick, what I wanted to do over here, because at the moment we have this, so I wanted to add over here. So let's see if we have URLs, and for example, we have this URL. So if we do that, so a list of URLs pops up here. So real quick, I wanted to add a copy button over here, so we can copy this URL. So let's go ahead and implement that. To do it, actually, it's going to be really simple. Our target is to copy this shortened URL. So come over here and then create a copy button. Okay, folder, and pretty much just create a page.jsx. Quick update, over here in all these something I forgot to do in all these pages, if you for example, when you take a look at the APIs, just go ahead and this should be JS, okay? But if you're going to include HTML into your pages, okay, your components, just rename them JSX, okay? So for example, over here, I can rename it to JSX because I'm using HTML within JavaScript, okay? It's gonna be the same, nothing is gonna change. All right, it's just a more better approach to do it this way. So go ahead, all here, and what else? Footer, rename it to JSX, and hero, just go ahead and rename it to JSX. So I'll go ahead and rename these fast forward. And over here, we still have the same implementation. So if we say elite bytecode, and then we add that, so we still have the same functionality. However, these that have logic in them, notice there's no HTML in here, so keep them as JS. The same thing applies to those using TypeScript. Use these as TS, and over here, make sure that they are TSX. All right. So let's go back to our copy button that we instantiated earlier on, and then just go ahead and add a React arrow function component over there, and then go ahead and name it copy button. Okay. So if you do not have that plugin installed, remember you can just simply go over here and then install ES7 plugin. This is what I am using. You can see that there are over 13 million downloads. Okay, now going back to this, now we need to make sure that if we go back over here to our all URLs, because that's where we want to instantiate our button. So just pretty much add the button just right after this empty span, and you can just call it that and make sure that will auto import it. Make sure it's imported over here. Okay, so now I can actually do this because that at alias just helps to make sure that it looks for the exact spot where a button is. So it looks like it's in component and components. Okay, and yeah, that should, if you have any doubts and you're writing it from scratch, just add at and it will exactly show you where you are. And then go ahead and look for I think we are in app, I guess, and then look for components and then look for copy button. Okay, now you can go ahead and add that as well, but the actual file sometimes may not matter. So yeah, we have successfully implemented that. So now go back over here. Remember, in here we just have a simple text. Okay, now go back to your if we type in something here, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to Elite Bytecode, and we are gonna pretty much paste our URL. So yeah, we have the button already there. Okay, cool, sounds good. Now let's go ahead and pass. We're going to use props. So we already have this. We do not need to, make a fetch from the database again. That's pretty much exhausting the server. So all you need to do is to use props. And how to do it, we're going to use this shortened URL and pass it as a prop over here. So I'll call it short URL with caps. It doesn't matter how you name it, just name it to something that is unique and different from this. Okay, so now this prop is available to the component. Come back over here. Our work in all URLs is done. Come back over here and then go ahead and destructure it so that it's available. Now we can for example, right here something like const. Actually, let me just write it here. Okay, something like that. All right, of course, this is just for testing to make sure it's available. Now, if we come back over here again, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. All right, so we have that URL available to the child component. Awesome. So the first thing we can do in here is to create our button. Okay, and so just go ahead and create a button in here, and then we can just write something like copy URL. Okay, all right, so we can give it a name, class name, and it's pretty much going to be flex items center, and then justify content center, and gap of x, that is 2, and then a padding of y that is about 2.5, and then p padding x that is 4, and then we can make the width full, and then text white because we are going to make the background teal. Okay, so font semi bold and the background teal of about 300. Okay. All right, so let's see if this displays. Okay, I want to make sure everything checks out, and then okay, let's just try to see if this displays. So abd and then the local URL right there. So okay, so that displays, but let's make it a little bit better. All right, with the UI, so let's make it a little bit modern and better. All right, so over here we can give it something like on hover. Okay, we can give it something like background of a little bit 150. Okay, and then we can make the duration on that to be about 150 as well. Sorry, this is 400, and it can be rounded large, and then on small screens it can be with a margin of top that is 0, and then a width of auto. Okay, so that's width. Okay, so let's see the status of that. Okay, looks good to me. Okay, when we hover, let's maximize that. Okay, our hover is not active. Yes, because of that. Okay, when we hover, we have that. Okay, looks good to me. So now let's go ahead and implement a feature that is gonna make these two copy, like we're able to copy data from this URL. Okay, but first let's try to pull this together because it looks like the let's first create the issue at hand. Okay, we want to make sure that we are able to copy this URL. Okay, so let's go ahead over here. Okay, and then give it an on click method, and then it's going to be handle copy URL. Okay, so we need to instantiate this. So come over here and then create a const, and then the name of that, and then we're going to use an arrow function that returns something. Okay, so for now let's console.log, and then let's pretty much just copy this URL. So we have something like URL and then a comma and then the short URL. Okay, so let's see if we copy, we'll press this button. So EBD elite bytecode, and then this over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and inspect. Okay, over here to console, and we want to see if this shortened URL will populate over here. So copy, yes, we have it. Awesome. Now go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you think that you are learning something amazing moving forward. Okay, so now that we have access to that, now to copy data from the DOM, it's actually pretty simple and straightforward. So, okay, so what we need to do is to get rid of that and then just use a try catch, because there's a possibility that the URL is missing and we may not be able to copy it. So all you can do over here, if anything goes wrong, just say throw new error, or you can alert or anything. Okay, I'll just use this, then do something like failed to copy the URL. This you can do the same thing and maybe alert. Okay, alert, and then in here you can add something like error. Sorry, I'm gonna use whatever error that is happening, so we can populate the error in there. And so we can say error, this is the text, and then populate that. Okay, however, if everything is successful, all we need to do is just pay attention, await, okay, and then navigator dot write text, dot clipboard, okay, dot write text. Okay, and what are we looking for? We are looking for the short URL. Okay, so now this, okay, this is await. Okay, yeah, await, and then await always works on asynchronous function. So come over here and make this asynchronous. Okay, awesome. So now we have we're able to copy text if we decide to press this button. Okay, so go ahead and come over here and do something like, yes, we need this URL. I want something way, okay, let's just use this honestly. So copy that and paste it over here and then shorten. Okay, I want to make sure that if we come to the console, okay, and over here, let's write something like that tells that we were able to copy. Okay, let's say something like URL or short URL, short, sorry about that, so short URL is copied. Okay, so we just want to see if it has been copied. So if we come over here and because I want to make sure that this segment of the code works, so come over here and all right, so it works. So we're able to copy that text, and if we paste it over here, so now we have the shortened URL. Okay, sounds good. All right, cool. So remember, when we copy, we want this text to change. Okay, for some reason we do not want this to be there just like that. So to do that, actually it's straightforward. All right, let me show you how you can take care of that. So you can create some sort of like use state, okay, and then set a timer, and then the timer will track this button. If this is successful, that timer will change what button is displayed. So let's put that to practice. So all we can do is to create a const. Let's use something like copied, okay, and then set is copied. Okay, and then initially it's going to have a use state, okay, and in here it will have a false. Okay, and remember, when you use state, by default in Next.js, everything is a server component, so you need to manually change it to client component. Okay, so now over here, okay, this does not belong there, this belongs here. Okay, so what we're gonna do is that let's use these two buttons. I'm gonna copy this, okay, and all we need to do is that when we successfully copy the URL, all we need to do, so I'm going to get rid of this, is to set is copied to true. Okay, and then we can set a timeout. Okay, set a timeout to, remember this takes in 2 arguments. We can create a function that returns set is copied to false. Okay, I'll show you how this is really, and then comma, so that's the function that is going to be executed, and then the delay time. Okay, what is our game plan over here? We want this button initially to exist. Okay, that's the state over here. Okay, so we haven't copied that URL. However, if the user copies that URL, okay, now we set that, okay, you have copied the URL, everything looks good, it's successful. Okay, and then we want to set a timer for that session that, okay, you have copied the URL, and then we delay that session of copying the URL for about 2 seconds. Remember, the clipboard will have got the URL already. Okay, so this over here is not deleting the URL from the clipboard. It's just setting a session from being false, from being true to false. Why do we want to do that? We want to do that because we want to change to check over here. Okay, so let me show you something. This is what we want. We want to create a condition, okay, that says, actually I'm going to change this to is copied. Okay, so we want to check that, is it copied really? Okay, if is copied is true, this part of the code, if this part of the code is true, okay, then display, okay, a different button. Otherwise, so over here we have a colon, and then otherwise display something else. Okay, all right. Okay, so now do me a favor, the button of copy it, okay, and then come over here, because it should display when everything is false. The user has not copied the URL yet. Okay, all right, so bear with me, we're gonna break this step by step, and within seconds it will make absolute sense. Okay, we have that button over there, and then copy the same source code and then paste it over here, okay, as well. But then this time round, in the true part of this chunk of code, just change the text to copied. Okay, then we need to come over here to the background, and then we can give it something like blue, background blue. So we want to make sure that we have a difference, blue of about 950. Okay, and then make this blue as well. I mean, we're not gonna hover over in this kind of situation, and we want need the duration as well this time round. Okay, so now take note here, actually we are not gonna use the button here as well, because it's really doing nothing. Okay, all right, so let me know if this is not making sense to you, if it has complicated the whole situation for you. Just go ahead and let me know in the comments below, and I'll make sure I try to break down this further. And to get a sense of what's actually going on is that we're checking if is copied is true, right? What is copied? Copied is initially, the state is initially false. Okay, and that's why it's gonna run this code and display this button false. Okay, and at that point we're asking the user, do you want to copy the URL? Okay, this was our first button that we instantiated, and then it will display the copy, asking the user to copy the URL. when the user copies the URL over here, it will actually copy the URL, okay? And then now it will change the status of is copied to true, okay? Now doing so, it will now activate this button because this will run again to check is copied. Okay, now this time round is copied is true. And what will happen is that it's going to display this button. Okay, and then that will execute it. It will delay or it will display this button, or let me put it in simpler terms, this button of copied will display or will delay or will be displayed for 2 seconds. Okay, and then after that is set copied will be reset to false. So this actually, what it means is that the set timeout is asking this function to be executed after 2 seconds have passed. Now guess what? If this is copied is set back to false, it will send it to this one or assign it to is copied, and guess what? If it's copied, this will check if okay, is copied now is back to false. Now this will display back. Okay, now let's test this in our application and see if everything looks like as we expected. So I'll copy this, paste it over here, and then write elite bytecode. Okay, so elite bytecode. All right. Okay, so we haven't imported use state, so I'll add a comma over here. All these are coming from React. Okay, so let's go back to our app. So paste that, and then okay, so now this is the moment of truth. So copy. Okay, so that worked, right? Copy. Okay, that's too fast. Like, we're gonna have to change that. Over here, we increase the seconds. So let's go back over here, and then bang, perfect. Bang. So now let's check if this URL, it ends with Q9. Let's see if it's actually copied. Perfect. All right. So everything works as expected. So let's go over here. This ends with 40. Copy. Copy. Yes. We are good to go. If you found this very helpful and you learned something in this section, fragment of this whole tutorial, go ahead and comment down below and let me know your experiences of times that you've seen this feature working and wondered how it works. So there you go. I've just showed you how content is copied on a web application. In the next part, we're going to show you how we're going to link this shortened URL, because at the moment we can copy and paste them into different parts of the browsers, but then it doesn't route back to the original URL. Okay. All right. So see you in the next part of this series. Now, all we need to do right now is to find a way to map this URL to the original URL, such that when the user copies this URL, they're able to use this to redirect users to the original. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do it. Now to do that, actually, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna come over here and then go all the way to pages, and within pages, not the API, but just pages, just create a folder with, a file with square brackets, and then just call it .capture URL data.js. Okay, so this is capture. So one thing you need to remember is that whenever you use square brackets in a file, you are trying to work with parameters of some sort, like it could be an endpoint or anything, but you're trying to work with parameters of some sort, and you're trying to access a given parameter within an endpoint, more so when you're coming to the pages directory. So now our aim here is that we want to, so this is going to be dynamic. Okay, it's going to be dynamic to whatever endpoint. So this will be capturing the endpoint, for example, over here. So this endpoint, okay, so it will come and look, remember we are not in API, so pages will start from here, and we have the custom name and we have the nanoid. Okay, so our aim is to grab this nanoid. Okay, and to do that we are simply gonna come in here. I'll walk you through how we can do it. So all you can do is to create an export asynchronous function, and then you can name it anything, like something like get think of a name, I would just say server side props. Okay, and name it that. And then how we are going to access those parameters like the nanoids, we can use a context in here. Okay, okay, async is okay, async. All right, cool. So now all we're gonna do is to const and then destructure, and then make something like capture, like let's say the captured URL data. Okay, and then equals to context dot params. Okay, the parameters that we're looking for are the custom name and the nanoid. So we know that there are two of them. We know that the aim of this is to get the URL, and that URL should have a couple of parameters. What are the parameters? We have custom name and we have the nanoid. Okay, so now we need to check if those two are existing in the captured URL data. Okay, so we can do captured URL data. Okay, and then do something like dot length. Okay, dot length, and then we're trying to see if they are not equal to 2, the parameters. Okay, because this is the whole URL, but this is fetching the the parameters, which is custom name and the nanoid. So we're trying to check if they are not equal to 2, then we can sort of like return something like not found. This is a JavaScript class. Okay, is equal to true. Okay, so that will populate something like not found. Okay, however, if everything is all good, all right, now we need to extract those, the custom name and the nanoid. So we can do something like const custom name and then comma the shortcode. Okay, and then in here we can give them, assign them to the URL. So we are getting the custom name and the shortcode, and we are fetching them from the captured URL if everything checks out and there's no issue with the 2 parameters. Okay, so now that we have access to that, we can come over here and then construct our URL. Okay, so we have full, okay, I'll go ahead and turn this off. So we have the full URL. Okay, can name it full shortened URL, which will now equal to a string literal, and then we can do something like process.env. Okay, okay, so we have if we come to our local file. Okay, so not that, we have our domain name. Okay, and then we can add something like a parameter, because now we've destructured and fetched these custom name and shortcode. So now we have the custom name. Okay, and after that we have the shortcode. Okay. All right. So to walk you through what just happened here is that this context is fetching the parameters. Our aim is to fetch the parameters from the URL. The URL is pretty much, if I go back to my browser, this is our URLs. Remember, the user is going to use this to share on their social media platforms. Okay, but our target, this domain will be like whatever name, elitebytecode.com/elitebytecode / the nanoid. Okay, so we need to fetch this. So this is going to be permanent, but that's why you see a tinyurl.com/the nanoid. Okay, so this is what is going to be dynamic. So we are fetching those two arguments, okay, and we are storing them in the captured URL. Now we are if there are two, then we proceed to the next step. However, if they are not, we're going to say that, we do not have that in our database, because all our database knows that we need a custom name and a nanoid. Okay, and then we will store those two, okay, fetch them from the captured URL, and then now they will be available to construct. Behind scenes, we are reconstructing. Okay, if I come back over here, we are reconstructing this URL over here. Okay, if I do this, so this is what we're trying to reconstruct. Okay, so process.env.nextPublic base URL is pretty much this statement over here, and then we're building whatever custom name the user gave us and the shortcode. Okay. All right. So when this is entered through a public web address or whatever, we will come and get the custom name from that URL the user posted, and we will also get the nano. Hope that makes sense. If you're still confused, let me know. I can break this down further for you privately on my Instagram page or Twitter/X, or we're also on Blue Sky and all major platforms that are out there. All right. And by the way, we also opened up a podcast right now. We talk about news and ongoing tech innovations that are going on right now. Just go to any platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major platforms where you listen to podcasts. Just search for Elite Bytecode. We're all there, and we're giving you the news, the latest every week. We try to release something every week to let you know what's going on in the tech world. So now let's move forward. Now that we have this URL, and to move forward, we're going to use a try catch. Okay, and so here we can simply just do something like a throw new error, and then in here you can do something like URL or something like a server error, and then tell the user what error is actually being fetched error. Okay, so most times it's like it has failed to, the URL does not exist in the database. You can update that, and you don't need to really worry yourself about this, because this error will automatically generate and it can be added over here. Okay, and then what you can add on is return a not found. Okay, so something like a not found. This is built in a JavaScript. Okay, so what you're actually trying, this is built in JSON. You're trying to use JSON to create a JSON message that will be populated and sent to the user when they try to console logs. Okay, so the message will be not found, and then it will be true. So this is a JavaScript property that you can just pretty much look up and find more information about. However, if we move forward over here, if we try catch, so we're going to get the client. We're going to try to ping the database, and then we can await client promise. We're trying to make a connection to the database, and try to see if this URL, full shortened URL, exists. So the next thing we need is a DB. So client dot DB, and then our database name is URL. I believe if we came here, so all we are trying to do is pretty much this. So I'll copy this to avoid any errors. Okay, and paste that. So we've made a connection to the database. Now the next thing is to now find in the database. Okay, find the shortened URL in the database. So now all we can do is URL, give it something like URL data, and then is equal to await, then collection dot find one. Okay, I need to make sure I fix that find one, and then in here is where we are going to remember we are fetching for this full shortened URL, but in the database does not know this, so we need to match it to what's in the database. So the database knows shortened underscore URL. That is what is in our MongoDB database. Okay. All right. So now if we find it in the database, okay, if it's there in the database, all we need to do is return something like JSON that is going to redirect, okay, the user destination. So we need to make sure that we have the destination URL data to the original, okay, underscore URL, and then permanent, that will be false. Okay, a quick walkthrough of what's actually happening here is that if this URL, we're trying to query the database and find if this URL that we just built is actually there in the database. In the database, we are trying to look for it as the shortened URL. So if it's there, it's going to be stored in the URL data. So now here we are checking if this URL data actually exists. If it's true, okay, if it's not null, if it's there in the database, now we are redirecting the user who sent us this URL. We are redirecting them to the original URL. That's how we're doing. We're using redirect to pass in the destination that we want the user to go to, and then permanent false. Okay. Now, other than that, that should be it. So all we need to do over here is to give some sort of export. I'll add a comment over here. Don't want to waste time, so much time. Just go ahead and read through this. I'll minimize that. Okay, so all we're trying to do is that the page component requirement. Next.js expects every page to export a React component, even if the page is only used for server side. All right. Routing mechanism. Next.js, when Next.js processes a route, it looks for the default export to render something if needed. Okay, so that's why we should by default just add a default function. It's not really needed, but because this makes Next.js happy, so we are going to just add that and return null. Okay, there's nothing in here. Okay, so nothing in there. So that's pretty much. So fingers crossed. If we go back to our I forgot to restart. So here, cancel this and then restart. If this works, now we are closer to the end of this video, and now that is running. So over here, so if we copy this and this should route us to the main page. Okay, the error is actually coming from over here. So notice that we named our destructured data captured URL data. We actually just need to name it, remove the D, And then over here, we're checking for if this variable that is holding the parameters, if the length of it is not equal to 2, then return false. Then otherwise, if everything checks out, make sure that you come over here and then fetch or destructure or get access to the custom name and the shortcode within these parameters. Okay, and then the rest should pretty much be the same. Remember over here that this is a variable and you should not write it as a plain old text in because over here we need to process the URL that is coming from the env file over here. Okay, another thing is that you need to pay attention to the trailing slashes over here, because if you do that, it's going to affect how you implement the URL over here. If you have a trailing stretch, remember a trailing slash, remember to take this out. If you do not, just make sure you add it over there so that when you're pulling your URLs over here, they are able to match the URL over here. As always, okay, I just broke something over here. Okay, as always, this is always the domain. Okay, when you're deploying your application to production, this will be the domain and this will be the shortcode. Okay, so now if we test, further testing, and I'll go ahead and search something on Google. Let's just go ahead and copy this URL, then come over here and then paste it and then subscribe. So that's the only URL. So over here, actually what I'm gonna do is YouTube, and then search for Elite Bytecode. Then over here,
there we go. There we go.
Come in here, shorten that URL, and then now if we try to close that, if you try to visit that shortcode, we will go straight to our channel. Okay, awesome. So thank you for sticking around in all straight from the moment we were actually starting from scratch building this application. I'm glad that you were able to stick around and you were able to learn a few things here and there when it comes to building applications on with Next.js 15. Now I try to release videos bi-weekly, and if you do not want to miss, I'm going to be doing this moving forward, building applications that are building projects that you can pretty much just add on your resume and also learn a few things here and there using Next.js 15. Now go ahead and smash the like button if you like this video. And also make sure that you click the bell icon. That way YouTube lets you know that we released a video for you to just go ahead and get your feet wet into building real-world applications. I'm going to dive into React Native as well, and we're going to be building cross-platform applications, so you do not want to miss that. Go ahead and subscribe. Later on, I'll also be building applications that involve robotics, so if you do not want to miss that, embedded systems, stuff like that, I'm here to share information that you guys can learn from and try to get yourself acquainted with web development. You never know, you could build your own fast startup. Okay, all right, see you in the next video, and Merry Christmas to you all, and enjoy the holidays. Bye bye.